To this public meeting of the ECR's Migration Policy Group. During today's meeting, interpretation will be provided in English, Spanish, Italian, Polish, French, and Romanian. Colleagues, what on earth is going on in Britain? Home of the Magna Carta, the world's oldest parliamentary democracy, and yet today, parents are arrested for private WhatsApp messages about their child's school. Mass migration is overwhelming towns and cities. Free speech is censored, while Islamists preach death to apostates in public. And those calling for a return to common sense are branded the enemy by the Prime Minister. How is this possible? Whatever happened to every man's home is his castle. It's tempting to think these things only happen elsewhere. But Britain shows how fast democratic norms collapse when governments weaponize fear. They cite foreign interference, online harm, or disinformation, then construct censorship regimes that reach far beyond their mandates. And we're seeing the same drift here in the EU. Opposed by German Police Union Vice Chair Manuel Ostermann, warned Germany is on track to become an Islamist-dominated, lawless state by 2050, citing parallels with Britain and calling for an immediate 180-degree policy reversal, was censored on X in the EU. But it could be viewed by anyone with a VPN. The Digital Services Act, presented as a shield against Russian propaganda, is already being used to suppress mainstream European voices. This is mission creep, and it's accelerating. So mattgoodwin.org. I now give the floor to you, Dr. Goodwin.
Well, thank you very much, Charlie. Thank you to the organisers of this event today. Thank you to all of you for attending this discussion. I'm just going to lay out a few facts about the United Kingdom that I think will answer some of Charlie's questions. Why are we experiencing a political realignment, a historic moment in British politics that will, at the next general election, deliver a reform government led by Nigel Farage? By the year 2063, white Britons will be a minority in the United Kingdom. Among the under 40s, that will happen as early as 2050. By the year 2079, people born outside of the United Kingdom and their immediate descendants will represent a majority in the entire United Kingdom. By 2100, the end of this century, 1 in 4 British adults and 1 in 3 British children, unless we change the current direction, will be following Islam. Today, in 2,000 schools in the United Kingdom, a majority of children do not speak English as their main language. Across the United Kingdom, 1 million people, according to the census, do not speak English. Mohammed is the most popular name among children. All of these things give you the answer as to why British politics is in a state of flux. We have an immigration demographic crisis which nobody in Westminster is responding to. And that crisis has 2 key pillars. The first is the illegal migration crisis. According to the Pew Research Centre, we have an estimated 1.2 million illegal migrants operating in the United Kingdom, living and working in the UK today. They are being joined by nearly 200,000 additional illegal migrants arriving on the small boats crossing the Channel from France. Once they have entered the country illegally, they are then being distributed, dispersed by the Labour government. They are being put into the heart of our local communities, next to families, next to schools, next to synagogues, next to children. We don't know who they are. We don't know where they come from. We don't know what they believe. The cost of that dispersal is £5.7 million every day to the British taxpayer. If current trends continue, by the time of the next general election, another 181,000 illegal migrants will enter the UK illegally. They include, for example, the recent case of an Egyptian asylum seeker, a member of the Muslim Brotherhood, who was convicted of making bombs in Egypt, entered the UK illegally, was then put in a 4-star Hilton hotel at the expense of UK taxpayers, was allowed to roam the streets of the UK for 17 months while the government decided whether or not to grant his asylum request, during which time he walked into Hyde Park, London, and raped a woman in that park. I could sit here and give you 100 similar cases to that. The illegal migration crisis is making a mockery of the United Kingdom's claim to be a self-governing, independent, sovereign nation, and it is breaking the social contract between citizens and their democratically elected politicians in Westminster. It is being compounded by the legal migration crisis, which began with Tony Blair in 1997 and was then accelerated by the so-called Conservative Party. Most recently, under Boris Johnson, mass immigration, mass uncontrolled immigration was put on steroids. From 2021, nearly 4 million legal migrants entered the UK under Boris Johnson's liberalisation strategy. 80% of all of that migration came from outside of Europe. 80%. From Nigeria, China, Uzbekistan, India, Pakistan. It has fundamentally reshaped the country with no democratic mandate. Nobody voted for that. Nobody asked for that. It was not in any party manifesto. In fact, Boris Johnson promised the opposite in 2019 when he said he would lower the overall numbers. And he did the opposite. To give you a sense of the scale of demographic change in the United Kingdom, I'll give you one fact. In every single year since 1997, in each single year since 1997, there has been more immigration into the UK than there was during the entire period between the Anglo-Saxons in the 5th century and the end of the Second World War. In other words, there was more immigration in each year since Tony Blair came to power, including under the Conservatives, than there was during 1,500 years that separated the Anglo-Saxons from Winston Churchill. That is the scale of change we are witnessing. We have seen more immigration into the UK in the last 4 years than we have seen since records began in 1701. Again, nobody voted for this. Nobody asked for this. The Westminster class will say it's making us richer. It's making us stronger. The evidence on the economics of immigration is now clear. From Finland to Denmark to the Netherlands and even now the United Kingdom, the Office for Budget Responsibility all say the same thing. The exact kind of migration that we now have in Europe, low wage, low skill, poorly educated, non-European, is making Western economies weaker, not stronger. It is a net fiscal cost. It is not a net benefit. It is imposing enormous costs onto UK taxpayers during what is also the worst cost of living crisis that we have had since the Second World War. The economic problem is one thing, the cultural problem is another. As we have also discovered through the rape gang scandal, the grooming gang scandal, which was the industrial scale rape of hundreds of thousands of British children by Pakistani Muslim gangs who got children addicted to heroin and alcohol and trafficked them from one town to another from the 1960s onwards. An estimated close to 1 million children were sexually abused and raped in this way. And politicians in Westminster said it was Islamophobic to suggest that that scandal was happening. And only recently was the Labour Party, under Keir Starmer, the Labour government, willing to give a national inquiry into that scandal to get those girls the truth and justice that they deserve. That is a symbol of the cultural problem that we have imported into the United Kingdom. It is not only an economic problem. We have imported cultures that are diametrically opposed to the traditions, the values, and the way of life that has traditionally held our country together.
So, 4 MEPs are on the list right now. I will close it. So one more, and then we close the list because we're running out of time. Lots of questions here, and the next one is to be posed by my colleague from Sweden, Beatrice Timgren.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your presentation. UK and Sweden have something in common, unfortunately, high amount of immigrants. In Sweden, we have a new government that try to do something to turn the direction, to reduce the immigrants. But still, some part of Sweden, the majority of the population, they are immigrants or second-generation immigrants. And the Muslim Brotherhood, they still infiltrate and continues to exert to influence in Sweden. Do you have any major advice for us in Sweden? And what do you think about the future for UK and also for Sweden? Do you think it's possible to turn it, or do you think it's already too late? Thank you.
Well, of course it's possible to change the direction of travel because everything that we're talking about reflects specific political decisions and choices that were made in previous regimes. So I'm having lived through something like the decision for Brexit, for example, the capacity of our countries to deliver radical reform, if we want to pursue it, or witnessing the decisions that are being taken by the Trump administration, is a reminder that, of course, we can make a different set of political decisions and choices. I think the similarity between Sweden and the UK, I think, as I've mentioned, is not just about mass migration, but is also a failure of integration and a specific challenge from Islamism. And Sweden, I think, has a more challenging task in that respect, looking at the forecasts of where Sweden will be in 2050 and 2060, according to the Pew Research Centre. It's going to be a very challenging situation. But of course, there are lots of things that you could do that we've alluded to throughout this conversation: ending the policy of mass uncontrolled immigration, investing much more aggressively in pro-family policies, changing the cultural consensus within the national conversation, enacting a strong clampdown on Islamist influence and organisational reach through charities, mosques, cultural networks, foreign funding, and so on and so on. These are all things that could be done. Banning visas from predominantly Islamic nations, as President Trump has done. These are all potential policy options that are on the table. My frustration is that, say, in my country, we are 20 years on from the 7/7 bombings across London. We have an estimated 40,000 extremist Islamists in the United Kingdom, according to the security services. 75% of all cases that the intelligence services are looking at are Islamist. The vast majority of terrorist attacks have been Islamist. And yet the political conversation would have you believe that this threat is somehow comparable with other forms of extremism, which isn't true. And the other thing that you quickly notice if you go through the list of perpetrators, take, for example, last week's attack in Manchester, same story, the son of Syrians, only recently come to the country. I've looked at the last 20 years of terrorist attacks and wrote on this last week. The vast majority of terrorists, of Islamist terrorists in the UK, were either first generation or second generation migrants, usually of Pakistani, Syrian or Libyan heritage, who can only trace their links in the country back one generation. We could be adopting a much tougher response with regards to dealing with that issue through assimilation and policies that deal with that head on. The narrative of homegrown Islamists, for example, is ridiculous, because we don't actually really have homegrown terrorists. What we have are Islamists coming within very tight cultural networks, within communities that are refusing to integrate and are not being assimilated into our culture and our way of life, which needs to change urgently.
And